The first light of dawn stretched across Cincinnati's streets, bathing the city in soft hues of pink and gold. Garrick pushed open the door to the Daily Grind, a beloved cafe known for its rich coffee and welcoming atmosphere. Inside, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the gentle murmur of early morning conversations. This was Garrick's routine. A quick black coffee before diving into the day's tasks, with an important meeting looming ahead. The line was short, just a few people ahead, so Garrick slipped into place at the back. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he quickly pulled it out to check emails, skimming through tasks with practiced efficiency. The faint jingle of the door barely registered as he focused on his screen, until the distinct sound of heels clicking sharply against the floor caught his attention. A woman in her 40s entered the cafe, walking briskly with a no-nonsense air. She glanced around the room, her eyes assessing, before she took her place directly behind Garrick. Her movements were quick and precise, her expression already showing signs of impatience. At first, Garrick didn't pay her much attention. The morning crowd often displayed a mix of exhaustion and frustration, and he assumed she was no different. But as the minutes passed, her irritation became more obvious. Loud sighs punctuated the otherwise quiet atmosphere, growing more pronounced with each passing second. Then came the grumble, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath. Garrick turned his head slightly, intrigued but indifferent. Her piercing glare made it clear that her complaints weren't random. He met her gaze briefly before returning to his phone, choosing not to engage. He had encountered this type of passive-aggressive behavior before, meant to provoke, but never enough to escalate. However, there was something sharper in her tone this time, something more personal. As the line moved forward, Garrick inched closer to the counter, maintaining a respectful distance. Then, her voice cut through the cafe's calm. "Excuse me," she snapped. "You just cut in front of me." The words hung in the air, and the cafe grew silent as people turned to witness the commotion. Garrick turned fully toward her, his face composed. "I've been standing here since I walked in," he responded evenly, his tone neutral but firm. Her eyes narrowed with intensity. "No, you weren't," she retorted, her voice rising. "I've been here, and you just barged ahead like you own the place." Her accusation was loud enough to draw the attention of other patrons, their curiosity now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. Garrick stood his ground, his posture relaxed but firm. "I haven't moved from this spot," he said calmly. Her arms crossed tightly, and her voice turned sharp. "Of course, you'd say that," she shot back. "People like you think the rules don't apply to them." The weight of her words hung in the air, creating an uncomfortable silence. Her tone was laced with layers of meaning, and it was clear the room was now on edge. Conversation ceased as patrons exchanged uneasy glances. The couple at the window shifted in their seats, visibly unsettled. Behind the counter, the barista paused, her expression tense. The woman took a step forward, her face reddening as she jabbed a finger in Garrick's direction. "I know exactly who you are," she spat. "You think you can do whatever you want. Cut in line, act like you own the place. It's despicable." Her words were sharp and laced with contempt, and the weight of her accusation hung in the air, making everyone in the cafe feel the sting. Despite the tension, Garrick remained calm, his posture relaxed yet unyielding. He could feel the room watching, waiting to see how this would unfold. He knew this wasn't just about the confrontation. It was about how the others would react to the moment. Would they stay silent or speak out? Garrick inhaled deeply, his composure unbroken as he met the woman's gaze. With a firm but steady voice, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear, he spoke. "What you just said isn't just an insult to me. It's a reflection of something much deeper. Your choice to show who you really are right here in front of all these people." The woman's confident stance faltered as she briefly looked away, trying to regain control. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered defensively, but her voice lacked the same force it had before. Garrick's expression softened, yet his words remained resolute. "Oh, you do," he replied. "And so does everyone here. Words like yours aren't just words. They carry a history, a weight, scars from struggles we've fought through. What you've exposed is something far bigger than this moment." The patrons in the cafe, who had been watching in tense silence, began to nod in quiet agreement. The man at the back, who had looked uneasy moments earlier, now leaned forward, his attention fixed on Garrick. Garrick turned slightly, addressing the entire room. Moments like this are about choices. Her choice was to speak out of ignorance and hate. "My choice," he continued, his voice steady but powerful, "is to respond with grace. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. We don't fight fire with fire. We fight it with water, with dignity, with truth." The barista, who had been motionless behind the counter, slowly stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Sir," she said, "your coffee is on the house. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." Garrick smiled softly, acknowledging her kindness. "Thank you," he replied. "But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about what we choose to tolerate and what we choose to stand for, or not." The woman shifted uncomfortably, her earlier arrogance slipping away as she became visibly uneasy. "I didn't mean," she began, but Garrick raised his hand gently to silence her. "You meant what you said," Garrick stated firmly yet kindly. "And now, you're facing the consequences, not from me, but from everyone here. The silence, the looks, the judgment. That's the world telling you that this is wrong. It always has been." A man near the window, who had remained silent until now, spoke up in a calm but firm voice. "He's right," he said. "What you said was wrong. You owe him an apology." A ripple of agreement spread through the cafe as others joined in. "You can't talk to people like that," one woman added. "What century are you living in?" Another chimed in, her voice direct and uncompromising. The woman's face turned bright red as she looked around, meeting the disapproving eyes of everyone in the cafe. For the first time, her bravado faltered, replaced by visible unease. She stammered, but her words faded into silence as she realized the weight of what she had said. Garrick exhaled slowly, feeling the gravity of the moment. He took another breath, his voice softer but still carrying a steady truth. "Apologies can't undo what's been said," he said quietly, his tone resolute. "But they're a start, and if you're not ready to apologize, take a moment to think about the damage you've caused, not just to me, but to yourself and to everyone here who had to witness this." The woman opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Her hands shook as she glanced around, the tension thick in the room, but she remained silent. She stood there, trapped in the uncomfortable quiet she had created. Once again, the room fell still, the weight of Garrick's words hanging heavily in the air. The patrons absorbed the shift in the atmosphere, processing everything that had unfolded. After what felt like an eternity, the woman lowered her gaze, defeated. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, a stark contrast to the stillness that filled the cafe. The door closed softly behind her, and a moment later, a hesitant sound broke the silence. Applause. It started quietly, uncertain at first, but soon more people joined in. The clapping grew stronger, more unified, filling the cafe with a collective sense of respect. The applause wasn't for the woman's exit. It was for Garrick, for his calm, his composure, and his ability to transform a tense moment into something meaningful. It was for his courage to face hostility with dignity, and for his wisdom in responding with grace. Garrick stood for a moment, allowing the applause to wash over him. He wasn't someone who sought praise, but he recognized the significance of the moment. This wasn't about him. It was about everyone in the room acknowledging the power of compassion, the importance of standing up for what's right, and refusing to let hate prevail. As the clapping subsided, Garrick turned to the barista, who had been standing quietly at the counter. Her expression softened. "Can I get my coffee now?" Garrick asked lightly, bringing a sense of normalcy back to the room. A few people chuckled, and the barista smiled, visibly relieved. "Of course," she replied, quickly preparing his drink. When she handed him the cup, she paused, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice sincere, "for handling that the way you did." Garrick nodded, accepting the coffee. "Thank you for standing up," he said. "Moments like this take all of us doing our part." As he turned to leave, a young woman at a corner table hesitated before speaking. "Wait," she said, her voice uncertain but clear. Garrick stopped and turned back to her. "What you said, it mattered," she said softly. "We all needed to hear that." "Thank you." Garrick smiled gently, touched by her words. "We all have choices," he replied, his voice calm. "Every day. I hope you make the right ones." With that, he stepped out into the warm sunlight, the breeze offering a quiet peace after the intensity of the moment. Inside, the cafe began to hum again, conversation slowly picking up, but something had changed. The room felt more thoughtful, more reflective, and the energy had shifted. A couple near the window leaned in, their voices softer now, as if their conversation had shifted. "Maybe we should call Mom," the woman whispered. "I don't think I've spoken to her in a month." Her partner nodded, his gaze thoughtful. At the back of the cafe, the man who had been fiddling with his phone earlier muttered to himself, "I should call my brother. Haven't spoken to him in years." The barista, returning to her station, moved with more purpose now, her expression reflecting a quiet contemplation. The shift in the cafe was subtle but undeniable. Garrick's words had sparked something in everyone who had witnessed the exchange. It wasn't just about a confrontation. It was about the power of words, their ability to heal or to harm. The moment had left an imprint, and though the day moved on, the memory lingered. Garrick walked down the street, coffee in hand, his mind still processing the events. He didn't feel victorious. This wasn't a triumph. It was something deeper, more nuanced. It was progress, even if it was only a small step forward. As he rounded the corner, disappearing from sight, he hoped that the woman and everyone in the cafe would take something meaningful from what had happened. Not just another argument, but a lesson in humanity. After a long pause, Garrick's voice broke the silence again. He had stepped back into the cafe, his eyes sweeping over the remaining patrons. "I'm not here to make a scene," he said, his tone steady, carrying a quiet authority. "But I think we all need to recognize something. Hate doesn't grow in a vacuum. It thrives in silence, in indifference. Moments like this are opportunities, not just for me to stand up for myself, but for all of us to decide what we'll tolerate in our spaces." The cafe was still, but the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was reflective, even solemn. The barista, watching him intently, nodded slowly, her arms crossed in front of her apron. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but unwavering. "You're right," she said. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to deal with that here." Garrick gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's not about this cafe," he replied softly, shaking his head. "It's about what we do next, how we respond, not just in this moment, but the next time we see something like this happen. Every day, we make choices that either build bridges or burn them." Near the window, a young woman raised her hand cautiously, as if back in school. I just want to thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "for handling that the way you did. I don't think I could have been as calm or brave." Garrick's smile grew warmer, his expression softening. "Bravery isn't about not feeling angry or hurt," he replied, his voice gentle. "It's about choosing what to do with those feelings. We all have that choice." The man who had spoken earlier, the one who had first offended Garrick, nodded again, his voice firm. "You made the right choice," he said. "That took strength, real strength." The cafe had changed. What had started as a tense, almost suffocating moment had shifted into something else, a shared experience, a spark of solidarity. Conversations resumed, but the tone had changed. People spoke in softer voices, more thoughtful. They shared stories of standing up to injustice, of moments when they had wished they had spoken out but hadn't. It wasn't chaotic or loud. It was a quiet hum of reflection, a collective recognition that they had all been part of something much bigger than just a morning coffee run. As Garrick collected his coffee, the barista reached across the counter, handing him a second cup with a smile that held both warmth and resolve. "For the road," she said, her eyes twinkling, "and for being the kind of person we need more of in this world." Garrick chuckled softly, accepting the gesture. "Thank you," he said, his tone sincere. "But remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up when it matters." He turned toward the door, but before he could leave, he paused and looked back at the room of patrons. "One last thing," he said, his voice carrying easily over the quiet conversations. "Moments like this, they don't just happen here. They happen everywhere. And every time they do, we have a choice. To stay silent or to stand up. Choose wisely." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Garrick stepped outside, and the cool morning air filled his lungs as the door swung shut behind him. The sunlight seemed brighter now, the world a little lighter. But even as he walked away, he knew the weight of that moment would linger with him, and with the others, for some time. Garrick paused on the sidewalk, looking down at the coffee cup in his hand. The warmth radiating through the cardboard sleeve reminded him of something his late grandmother used to say. Kindness isn't weakness, it's power. Because it takes strength to choose it. Her words echoed in his mind, guiding him as they always had. He glanced back at the cafe, catching a glimpse of the patrons inside. Conversations were still flowing, their faces animated, but there was a thoughtful quality to their expressions. He couldn't hear their words, but he didn't need to. The story of what had happened was already spreading, carried by their voices, their actions, and their reflections. Garrick's thoughts drifted to the woman, her anger, her ignorance, the pain she carried. He could still feel the sting of it. He didn't fool himself into thinking his words had changed her, but maybe, just maybe, they had planted a seed. Change wasn't about instant results. It was about planting seeds and trusting they would grow, even in rocky soil. Inside the cafe, the ripple effect continued. A young man near the counter leaned into his friend, his voice quiet but firm. "You know, I've been meaning to speak up about that guy at work. The one who always makes those jokes. Maybe it's time I said something." An older woman sitting near the window nodded thoughtfully to herself, as if silently promising to do better. The barista, back at her station, moved with a renewed sense of purpose, her expression one of quiet determination. Garrick didn't need to see or hear any of it to know it was happening. He could feel it. Change wasn't always loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and persistent, like water carving its way through stone over time. As he walked down the street, Garrick's mind lingered on one final thought. Moments like these weren't just about responding to hate. They were about creating ripples. Every action, every word, every choice had the potential to inspire someone else to think, to act, to grow. He smiled to himself, the warmth of the coffee cup spreading into his hands. Kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength. And strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about lifting them up, even when they didn't realize they needed it. Garrick turned the corner and disappeared from view, but the impact of his actions remained, etched in the memory of everyone in that cafe. They would carry it with them, a reminder that dignity wasn't something anyone could take away. It was something only you could choose to surrender. And Garrick, he would keep walking, keep choosing kindness, and keep planting seeds. Because in a world filled with darkness, even the smallest light could make all the difference.